Hello again. Welcome back to the Woodright shop. My name is Roy Underhill. Novel tales. Novel tales. That's what I've got for you. And I've got something about it that a good friend of mine, Mr. Charles Dickens, you know him, had to say about novel tales. I'm speaking of Dovetales. And in his work, you may know it, Nicholas Nickleby, he described the cosmic significance of dovetails. He said, "The unities, sir, are a completeness, a kind of universal dovetailedness with regard to place and time." It's true. Dovetails hold it together. They keep it together, and there's all different kinds. I've got some novel tales to share with you. Look at the regular dovetails, though, before we do. And they're called dovetails, of course, because they fan out like the tail of a dove. You know, when a dove flies off and you see them in the square, they have their tail fanned out. And that's the dovetail. And it's in the French, it's called the same thing. Le queue d'oronde, the tail of the dove, pigeon, whatever, same thing. Anyway, look at a regular dovetail. Now, here on this box got a dovetail that goes through, and it's exposed on both sides. You can see the tail itself here, how that fans out like a tail. It's kind of faint because it's all the same color. And here's a pin, a piece. So these pieces are exposed on both sides, and they can only come apart, of course. This can only pull apart in this direction. There is 1 degree of freedom in this joint. So a dovetail always has to have that. That's the one thing we're going to see, is that it can only come apart in 1 direction. Of course, if these were just straight, it could pull apart in 2 directions. It could pull apart like this, and it could pull apart like that. But a dovetail only goes 1 way. Now, here's a neat one. This is a dovetail, of course, that you use on drawers. This is called the half-blind dovetail, and I've pulled out a set of drawers here, and you can see the pine, the way the pine goes into the oak and tails out. It spreads out, fans out in the wood, so that as you pull the drawer open, you know, you're pulling the drawer, there's a lot of stress to pull this apart here. Well, it can't, because this is wedged in there. It's keyed in. So, again, the dovetail, 1 degree of freedom. Very strong, very useful joint. It's interesting. It was known in pretty ancient times, but it appears to have disappeared along with a lot of things during the Middle Ages, and was only a very few of the monks actually knew the dovetailing, and it came back in the late Middle Ages, early 17th century, earlier than that, but the dovetails disappeared and came back. Kind of a neat thing. And it's very important in things like construction. You talk about building here. Let me see if I can get this back together. I've taken this apart a little bit too much. Well, anyway, I can do it again. This is part of a little model of a hammer beam, and this is the part that would normally hang on the wall like this, and the hammer beam, and it has a dovetail here. I'm going to reassemble this a little bit, I think. And see how that dovetail slips in. Very, very strong. See, it can't go up, it can't go down, it can only go in and out the way it came. And of course, that direction is a direction in which there is no stress. So this is another kind of dovetail, very strong. Any pressure pulling down on that, this wedging will lock it. So very, very strong way. And this is just another, still just another kind. There are sliding dovetails. This candle stand here has feet on it that are also held by dovetails that slide out. Now, these dovetails, you can see, run the length of the base, and the tails, or actually the pins run the length of the base, and the legs have a little dovetail that slides up and down. I've even seen patch boxes on early you know, muzzle-loading rifles, where the patch box would go in, and they're held by a sliding dovetail, so a wooden patch box that slides on. So sliding dovetail, very good construction technique. I've got it here on this little bench as well. This little bench is kind of a puzzle bench, old early American design. You can see the way the single, this is a half dovetail like that one we were looking at on the hammer beam. This runs the full length of the bench, and it's a puzzle. There's no glue or any other kind of joint, just this sliding dovetail that runs the length of it. Now, if you think that's the limit there, no, we still got more. You remember this thing made a while ago? This is a idiot's delight is what it is. It is called a smoke grinder, or a do-nothing machine. You can see what it does. It does absolutely nothing, but it has 2 loose dovetails that run sliding like cams, I guess, inside the dovetail slots. And you can see that one has to move before the other can move. And it's the smoke grinder, a do nothing. There you go. And you think, well, now that's the limit. Certainly dovetails have reached their ultimate, but that is but the penultimate, because there is more. Yes, there is more. I want you to see the novel tails, and these are the dovetails that are used as kind of amusements amongst people who lack any greater amusement. And let me show you the first of these. This is, of course, a dovetail that comes in, well, it's very common. It's just a scarf joint. You can see this dovetail links these two pieces together, and you can see it's just dovetailed straight on like that. So, of course, it could slide, couldn't it? Wait a minute now. How does this come apart now? You're looking at this thing. Wait a minute. What is this? This thing is dovetailed around all four sides. Now, how is that possible? You know, a dovetail has to have only one way it can go. So if this wants to slide off this way, well, this tail is in the way. What on earth is going on? Well, this is an old trick. This is a classic wood carvers, whittlers, whatever. Somebody with too much time on their hands trick. A classic. And also, there is another classic technique of, before I show you how to do this, I am going to request that you see the rest of the things that I have to show you before I show you the solution to this. And I will indeed try and get you to wait before you see it. So I'm going to put this aside, let you think about this. How can you get a dovetail in from all four sides of a piece before we see how to do it? And see if you can solve it yourself, because there's a trick. There's a trick to it. I'll show you another one that has a neat trick to it, and it's right here. And in many ways, this is even neater. This is called the T puzzle sometimes. And you say, well, that's no big deal. Look at that. Here's a dovetail just stuck in piece of oak going into a piece of walnut. And you always tell when it's a puzzle because they'll use contrasting pieces of wood, won't they? As I have done here. And you'd think, well, this just pulls straight out, of course. We'll just pull this right on out, won't we? No, we won't, because look. Do you see what's happening here? See how that's dovetail? So this I can't push that down, can I? No, because that's dovetail like that. I can't pull this out, can I? No, because it's dovetail like this. And I can't go that way, obviously. What can I do? How does this come apart? So it's a mystery. This is an old puzzle that is very hard to solve if you think about it. But it's only hard if you know how dovetails are supposed to work. And I bet if you didn't, you could figure it out real easy. Let me show you how it works, and you can see for yourself, see if it makes sense. I'm just going to tap it apart, and you watch what happens as I tap right around here, and I can take it apart real gently. See that? Watch what's happening. Do you see how it's slipping back? It's not only coming up and out, but it's slipping down, and you can see the way it works. That's it. See, it's a tapered piece, and it goes into a tapered slot. And I think I have to put it back together and take it apart again for you to see that. That's what happens. See, it's recessed here. That's back in there. And as I slide in, it slips up into place and becomes flush with the surface. And there you are. And when you see it, of course, it looks like there's no way on earth this thing could come apart, is there? Because where's that direction of freedom? Well, it's just tapered. It slides down and slips out to the end. Let me show you how to lay this out. Take it apart one more time, because you have to see this. And if I don't explain this well enough, there are, look for books on whittling and wood carving, you know, from the early part of the 20th century. This was such a popular thing, it really was included in most of them. There we are. So you see, all it is, you have to lay out on the front, tapering dovetail like that. It has to taper on the end like this, and then beveled right down the back. And you just cut this piece to match it. Here's the bottom, the wide bottom where the piece goes in, and here's the top where it finishes up. And we'll go ahead and lay it out now. I'm going to lay it out in a little bit bigger size. Real simple. I mean, I'm not going to take too much time to do this because it is so simple. But take a gauge or something. See what I've done is take a gauge and just ran a line. I'm not going to readjust that, but ran a line right across here. I think I can see it. There we are. All right. There's a square line across. Now, take a bevel. You want to get a bevel like this, and you can set that first diagonal in. Now, don't do this. See what I'm doing? I've got very little wood. Here's always a problem when you're doing these ingrain joints. I've got very little wood to base this on here, see? And it can rock, and I may be very inaccurate. So slide up and do it this way. And now I've got that all the way across the base here. So I'm going to do it like this. Set that right on that edge, and whoop, whoop. All right, now swing around and do the other side. And again, not like this with just a very little bit of this base riding on it, but all the way over here. So I've got most of the base. Angle's the same side on either side of this bevel here. All right. You want to give as much contact between the piece of wood and there. There we go. All right, now same thing down the face. What I'm going to do is use the same angle just for the heck of it and come from the intersection right here on down, and again, use as much of the wood as you can on it, so that will obscure it for you a little bit, but you can see what I'm doing, down to a line that is the same, here we go, let me do this and I'll explain it, the same distance, yeah, there we are, and this goes down to a line that you can see scratched there that is the same distance as the piece that you were going to connect it into. Sorry, there's a line right there scratched on to that, so you can see how that's going to fit together. Now, what have we got to do? One more line here. I have got to cut from here down to the back side. That will give me a line just like that, and on here, see, so now I go all the way out from this top line down to there. All right, now, you just do the same kind of layout on the female piece that it's going to go into. You want to get to a shape like that. And it really is just a matter of sawing these apart. I'm just going to saw one shoulder of it so that you can see what it's going to look like when I do it. I'm going to slide it down here. I've got it on the bench. And I'm going to make my side cut first. Let me go over and get my saw. Excuse me. I'm just going to rip on down. Make that first cut, and you can see how quickly you can do this. Now, one thing is, I'm cutting the male part, really, I guess the tail itself that's going in there. You want to cut on the outside of that line. You want to make the part that goes into the pocket bigger than the piece it's going into. And I'm going to cut over here so you can see my relationship to the line a little bit better. And just rip right on down. Saw the diagonal of the cut first. There we go. Easy with a rip saw. And then take a little fine cross-cutting saw. Cut away the wood. There you go. All right, there's the first pop. There's the first part of it right there. Let me show you again the final pieces so you can get the idea. So it's just cutting away 4 cuts. 1, 2, 3. Actually, that's 3 cuts. And you end up with a shape like this that slips together like that. Perfectly clear. All right, you're all going to be tested on this later because it's a completely useless thing to do. No, it's not. There are applications for these kind of dovetails, and I'll show them to you in just a second. This one, though, really doesn't. The only thing that was ever much done with these was that folks would take them and make mallets. This is done for puzzle mallets in the 19th century. They'd take, instead of having one of these tails on here like this, they'd, of course, make 2 of them, so it comes up on both sides. So you've got 2 of these hickory tails coming up to a mallet head, and it would look like something that could never come apart. And all through the 19th, early 20th century, this was a very popular occupation, making puzzle mallets, and people have x-rayed them. And I'm not exactly sure how they're done, but I'm going to look at it, and we'll do that later on. All right, now, let's see the practical side of this kind of work, because there is a use for these kind of dovetails. And you get into it, one of the places is when you're building log houses. You realize when you're, it happens to you all the time, you're building a log house. You know, you stack up the logs on the end wall to make the wall, yes, the end wall where the fireplace goes, and then you cut the opening for the fireplace, and you've got to put a board up against the end grain of all those logs that you've cut. Same when you do a door or window, you've got to peg a board up to it. And you get into that problem of peg holding in end grain, same as nail holding. In other words, this is what you're doing. You're taking a peg, and here I've got one. This is out of Osage orange wood. Peg going into end grain, it won't grab. You just can't make the darn thing tight enough so that it won't pull out easy. And there's a very simple reason for that. It's to do with the grain. When you're pegging across the grain, now here's the grain, just like that, going lengthwise, and you drive a peg in, of course it grabs because you're going across the grain. So that cross-grain grab will hold the peg. You're going across the fibers, and they'll grab it. What about when you're going in end grain? Well, then you're going like this. You're going in long ways like that, and there's no grab to it. It just doesn't, it won't lock up. So you've got a problem. The pegs are always going to come out. What are you going to do? What will you do? Well, you turn it from a simple cylindrical peg into a dovetail, and you make a change after it's inside the log. Old trick. This is fox wedging. What you do is take your peg, saw a slot right down the end of it. Saw a slot down it, and make yourself a wedge that will go in that slot. Now, what will happen is when that peg hits the bottom of the auger hole, let's see if I can get that in there. There you go. When that peg hits the bottom of the auger hole, well, it's going to expand the peg, isn't it? But it's going to be deep enough inside the wood that it'll be held by this outer wood, and it's not likely to crack, is it? So this kind of thing, when that hits the bottom, that wedge will be driven up in there, expand this, and it should be tight. So let's go ahead and do it. I think I've got the wedge in there right. You want to make sure it's straight, because, boy, if it gets cocked over, you're out of luck. It will not work, and you'll be sorry. All right, now I'm going to hit this up here. Let's see how this goes. And this is how you do it. You're pegging your door frame or your fireplace frame to the end walls of your log house. I would say that that sounds as if it has bottomed out, wouldn't you? I think so. All right. Now, I can't pull it out. How are we going to tell? All I want to do is just, I'm going to split it open, and we'll take a look at it on the inside and see if it has done what I've hoped it was going to do. So this is tulip poplar, so it should be pretty easy to split. And if it doesn't split all the way like I wanted, I'll just chop open to it. Oh, shoot. All right. Well, the whole peg came loose, but let's see if I can see it anyway. Kind of hoping it would stay in place. Let's see if that wedge has indeed, yes it has, folks, been driven up inside there and expanded in the wood, and that would just never, ever come out. So that expanding peg, see, it had been driven all the way to the bottom, and the wedge driven up in there, that will expand within there and lock it. Now, it's not just in pegs, of course. There are other things that go in when you do a mortise and tenon joint like I've got here. This is a mortise and tenon joint like for doing a panel door or something. See, I've got the tenon. You can see the end grain coming out on the side, so the hole goes all the way through. This piece extends through there, and then there's the end grain of it. And this is locked by pegs going through here. All right, pegs. What if you don't want those unsightly pegs to show? You could, I guess, put a wedge on the outside. And, of course, many doors and windows are wedged out here. You enlarge the mortise that it goes through and wedge it out here. But what if you don't want it to show out there? You can do very much the same trick, the same thing, using a mortise and tenon joint. And I've got that right here. And this is, again, called fox wedging. Now, here is your typical mortise. And it is... see how that's in a solid piece of wood, and here's your typical tenon. And you want to make it hold. You don't want to have pegs through it. You want to make sure it's tight. You can do the same thing. But here, let's go in X-ray vision here. Normally this would be closed, and I would be doing all this with the chisel like this, and this is, of course, a solid block of wood, not two pieces. But inside it would look like this. You would have the hollow where the chisel's been driven in sequentially to cut it. And what you do when you cut your mortise, in this case, though, is drive straight down only for the first 3/8 of an inch and then start undercutting, see? So I get in there and I undercut on either side so that when I drive the tenon in, along with wedges that are placed into slots sawn into it, it's going to expand it into those corners. Let's see how this one does. I hope this will stay together a little bit better. And again, very careful, boy, because if this messes up, you are out of luck. Jack, whatever your name is, you are out of luck. Because this, if these bend over and break, they're going to expand it enough that you will not be able to get the tenon back out, but yet it will not have held inside there. So let's see if I've got it now. I would normally not be able to see this. This is a blind wedging, and now it's hit the bottom, and I can hear it having hit the bottom. I'm going to drive it, and you should see this expand. I hope it will. I'm going to try and hold it, and you will see that it will expand into that dovetail pocket that I have cut inside there. And it should be wonderful. I'm going to lay it down and hit it flat, because that is something I have to do because it's not enclosed here as it would be in the wood, but you can see it. See how it's driving up in here? See how that's swinging over there? And when I drive this up solid, all right. Now this is a one-way operation. Once you do this, you are not going to get that piece back out, because see down inside here, it has expanded. This has expanded into here, and it has locked up, and you're never going to get it apart. So you want to do this one right the first time. One of the very important things is with the wedges, when you're splitting the wedges, I just split them with a hatchet, the chicken method here. See, I've got the axe just split right down. And see how that worked to hold the wood on either side. I can split even this thin a piece in half again and hold it right like that. And there we go, right down the middle. See? So you can make very, very thin wedges and then trim them like that. It's the chicken method of splitting. Let me show you something, though, important, because the wedges, pegs, all that sort of stuff, very, very important that you choose the right quality of wood. And there's a problem that you get into with brashness. Brashness is caused in hardwoods when it grows too slowly. Normal wood should splinter very long splinters. Let me see if I can get a piece of normal hickory. I hope this is not brash hickory, because that would make me, this is supposed to be my good example here. I'm going to splinter this. Now you watch here. Watch the way this goes. It should split in long fibers slowly. Yeah. All right, there you go. That's what you want. See, long fibers. See the way those fibers are splitting? Ah, there we are. Oh, not so great, but it should split in long splintery fibers. Now here's a piece of oak, much thicker. Watch how this splits. Look at that. That's brash wood, grew too slow, not good for pegs, not good for much of anything in that department. Well, I'll show you one more thing about this axe before we go back and solve our puzzle. This axe here is interesting. This was given to me, and it's the same brand that was used in the Lizzie Borden misadventure. You can see this is made by the Underhill Edge Tool Company. So I don't know if they were kidding me or not, but that was the Underhill Edge Tool Company in Nashua, New Hampshire. Well, let's go see how that ridiculous dovetail was done. I have to hurry because I've spent most of our time fooling with these other things. How can this be? A dovetail dovetailed around all four corners. Well, it doesn't go at right angles. The trick with it is it goes diagonally, and that's all there is to it. See, it's diagonal dovetails, not a straight through dovetail. And there we are. See how that works? So it's dovetail with the tails are at a diagonal at 45 degrees to the squareness of the piece. The same with the pins. Now, some very, very simple tricks. Now, of course, the reason that's a trick to you, well, that makes, why is that? That's so dumb. That is so dumb. But we're used to thinking of dovetails running at right angles to a surface, so we assume that's the only way it could be. But, nay. Let me show you something about laying this out. And again, I'll get a pencil here. Because it's diagonal, the center line of this, it has to be from one corner to another corner. You don't mess with any kind of center line this way. Make your center line, just choose two corners, and that's going to be the center line of the stinking thing. So here, let me get one. Here's one. All right. Whoop, 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 whoop. Here's one. Mark two corners. All right. And those will be the ones that you gauge off of. Now, all a dovetail is something that's wider at the top than it is at the bottom, or wider at the bottom than it is at the top, depending upon whether it's the tail or the pin. So what I do is use two gauge settings. This gauge is set here with two little points in it to show what the top will be. So here, obviously, I'm cutting the female because I've got a narrow point. And I gauge off of here, and now turn and gauge off that same corner to do the other side. And here again, gauge off the one point, now the other point. All right, and I've got the lines that I can then connect to make my top cross piece here. So I can run lines across that will be the slots. There we go. All right, and then use it said. There you go. See how nice that is? So there's those diagonal lines I marked across with the narrow gap at the top. Now, I have another gauge that is set wider, and that can go down here at the bottom. All right, and it's again set wider, and that will make the wide flaring place. There you go. To make the wide bottom of that. I think you get it. Anyway, these are some of the novelist tales of all, and you can find out how to make them, but you work on it. I appreciate you joining me. Roy Underhill here in the Woodright shop. So long.
Bee honey up to the light, and you see nothing but pure, natural U.S. grade A clover honey. Light, golden, as nutritious as honey can be. And it's filtered for consistent quality. Maybe your family won't know that when they enjoy the natural sweetness of Sue Bee honey. But you'll know. Sue Bee honey. Purity you can see and taste.
There are some drips you can't do anything about. But you won't have to worry about drips again if you own a Moen faucet. Because of our exclusive washerless cartridge, Moen faucets last a lifetime. That's why we give them a lifetime limited warranty against leaks and drips. So you won't be bothered by drips again. Hey, is that a faucet or what? Moen, faucets for a lifetime.
Bob Kurtz, Brian...